right, so I just want to thank everyone. Let me start by thanking everyone for joining this call this evening. So I'm excited to officially be open for business. Your Productive Biz is a productivity coaching service. So I offer both one-on-one and group coaching services. And as a business productivity coach, I work with entrepreneurs that want to stop procrastinating, gain control over the use of your time, and accomplish your projects and goals. I will be hosting, some workshops later on in the year. So definitely make sure to connect with me. You can learn more about my programs and my offerings on my website at yourproductivebiz.com. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I host these free calls each month. I do look at these calls as being more advanced. I try not to talk on a 101 level, but really talk for those who are really trying to grow their businesses and kind of getting out of that startup mode. And I like to tackle the issues that entrepreneurs are experiencing. So these topics that I speak on each month are coming directly from entrepreneurs. So if you have a topic that you would like for me to cover, let me know. You can Facebook me, shoot me a tweet, anything like that, email, and I will work your request into my call schedule. So that's where these calls come from, because I get that question a lot. And so if you are able, I will definitely recommend that you're able to take some notes. If not, if you're driving or anything like that, no worries, because there will be a replay, but we are definitely going to cover some things that you want to make sure you can reference back to as you continue to grow your business. So today's call is on failure. That is the step that we can't skip on our way to success. So tonight's call is a bit personal for me. I think we can all relate back to a time or two or three that we've failed. I've definitely felt failure as a mother. I have felt failure as a friend, a daughter, in my career for sure, and as an entrepreneur. And some of those failures have had lasting impacts. I remember my first time feeling like I failed as an entrepreneur. It seriously took me about 8.5 years to decide to go back to being a full-time entrepreneur. Even as my knowledge of my industry and business in general continued to grow, I was worried that I myself would not be able to make it, that I would fail, that I would have to start over again, that I would lose everything that I had. I remember being a single mom and getting down to a place where I had my electricity and my gas cut off in the middle of winter. Now, at the time that this was happening, I lived in Georgia. And coming from California and living in Georgia and then moving to Colorado, you realize that winter in Georgia or California is very different than a winter in Colorado. But at the time for me, it still felt like it was really cold. And I had my little toddler, and I remember having to humble myself and go home to my parents' house for a few days. And it was just utterly embarrassing. At the time, I had been trying to beg the car company for more time so I could make my car note, and asking myself, where possibly could I hide my car if they were going to come back and repossess my car? And it was because my business was not doing well at the time, and I was working hard at it, and I felt like I just didn't know enough about business, and that experience was disappointing. It was humbling. It was a lot of things, right? And so I remember, back at that time, I had been helping other people get their businesses going while mine was staying stagnant due to my fear that I wasn't good enough. And that failure that I had endured was a testament not to what I know, but what I felt that I myself could do. And I think that's a key word, is endured. I endured that time. I think sometimes when we're facing failure, or we have faced failure, we often forget that we have endured. So I want to start tonight's call with the actual definition of failure. Failure is a lack of success, the omission of expected or required action, or the state of not functioning. So I want to repeat that once more. A lack of success, the omission of expected or required actions, or the state of not functioning. And I guess that sounds pretty bad, but you know what it doesn't sound like? It doesn't sound like it's permanent. It sounds disappointing. It sounds hurtful. It maybe even sounds shameful. But nothing in the definition of failure indicates that it's permanent. Yet so many times we have seen it shut down our dreams, our ambitions. We get scared. We lose our tolerance for risk. I think that's a really big one for entrepreneurs. We allow the voices of others in our head. We hear our own voices talking down to us and convincing us of everything else that we should be doing besides working towards our dreams and our goals, mostly because we're afraid of what that failure will bring. And sometimes we get caught up in hearing how someone overcame their trials. I remember listening to the Tyler Perry story and thinking how this man was still running plays while he was sleeping in his car. And we hear that story, and now that we see where Tyler Perry is, it's like, oh, this is amazing, right? Or we'll hear about, Oprah being fired, or, the list goes on. We can think of a number of different examples of people who have faced adversity and faced trials. And so when we hear those stories, they're inspirational to us at that time, but we really can't put that into perspective in our own lives. And we know in our mind that, the road for not just an entrepreneur, but anyone in life is full of turns and setbacks and victories and all of that combined. And yet in reality, when we're facing adversity, we often feel our failures are directly tied to our self-worth and our abilities. And we allow those failures to impact our confidence. So throughout this call tonight, what I want us to see is that failure is a necessary part of the process to succeed. And failure provides perspective, and it provides experience. The president of Pixar says mistakes aren't a necessary evil. He says they aren't evil at all. They are an inevitable consequence of doing something new and should be seen as valuable. And I think that's hard for us to see failure or mistakes as valuable because we've built this really unrealistic culture of perfection that in our minds we know can't exist. Like we know that it's not feasible for us to be perfect in every way. We know that we're going to make mistakes. We know that we're going to stumble. But yet we're so afraid to actually go through that process. We're afraid that it's going to hurt our ego or that we're going to be seen in a certain light. We're afraid that we're not going to be able to make it. We allow that to really impact us. And to add to that, what we find is that people who are experiencing too much success, especially early on, can have this extreme fear of failure as they continue to grow. And that can make them adverse to risk. Now, I've mentioned risk tolerance or adversity to risk twice because as an entrepreneur, that's really important. As we're growing our business, we have to continue to take risk, calculated risk, but risk nonetheless. And so as if we become adverse to risk or our tolerance for risk is really low, it really impacts the abilities that we have to be able to continue to grow our business. So some of you may be saying, that's not me. I don't fear failure. I don't have an issue with failure. So before we move forward, I want to unpack that a little bit so that we can talk about some telltale signs of fear of failure, some that maybe you're not aware that you participate in or that you are enacting in your own life that may be some signs that you have a fear of failure. So I'm going to kind of go through these a little quickly. You don't necessarily have to take note of any of these. Just think to yourself if you experience any of these and recognize them maybe for what they are. So maybe you don't desire to try new things. You like kind of sticking to what you know. Maybe you have a reluctance to get involved in projects or activities that you deem to be challenging. Maybe you practice in self-sabotage. So maybe you procrastinate or you don't see projects through to completion. You don't follow through with your goals. Maybe you participate in talks. That might even include, you might not even talk negatively to yourself. Maybe you talk negatively to others about yourself. So you lower their expectation of you so that you don't disappoint. You might experience some level of low self-esteem or low self-confidence, or maybe you experience trying to be a perfectionist and you only try things that you're really certain that you're going to do well in. And here's one that I think is really important. Maybe you experience physical trauma, like you might have headaches or stomach aches that stop you from completing your project, especially in the face of certain deadlines or things like that. You might find that you get sick often. So those are just some of the telltale signs of fear of failure. And I want to address some of those issues because, as we mentioned earlier, the journey of an entrepreneur, it's full of ups and downs and twists, and it's ongoing. And so what we have to recognize is that there is no actual destination, right? We are really here to enjoy the journey. But for many of us, failing has such a significant psychological effect on us that we become more motivated to avoid failure than we do to succeed. Let me say that again. If you experience that you are more motivated to avoid failure than you are to succeed, then that means that your fear of failure is having a severe psychological effect on you and it's impacting your ability to succeed and move your business to the place that you want for your family and for your life. So even though we understand that we can fail and move on, or maybe even that we should fail so that we can grow, we still do everything possible to avoid it. So how do we come to see failure as a part of our success? So I want to go into starting with being realistic. Let's be realistic about how we operate just as human beings. When you are facing failure, we are often hit with a blow to our ego, to our pride. We are filled with disappointment, maybe filled with anger, filled with shame. Like, these are real emotions. And finding value, the value that could be found inside of our failure, finding that value in the midst of all of those strong emotions being present is probably close to impossible. So one of the things that we need to do is to take some time. So I'm sorry, let me back up. I'm going to give us 4 points on what we can do to use our failure as a way to our success. And so that first one is to give us time, give ourselves time. And I just want to make that clear, that we have to allow for ourselves to process what has happened, for the fact that we have not met the expectations that we wanted, for the fact that we have not had the outcomes that we wanted. We have to process that. So just being realistic about who we are as humans, we should give ourselves time. Make it a point to come back and address and review the situation to learn the lessons, but give ourselves a moment so that we can kind of get our headspace where it needs to be, so that we can actually evaluate and find those nuggets of value that are inside of whatever situation it is that we have failed. So that's number one, give yourself time. Number 2, do a thorough review. So if you're in a position to be able to take some notes, here would be a good place for you to take some, because there are some key places and points that you can review that you would want to go back and look at when you have faced an experience or a situation where you are feeling that you have failed or fallen short. So the first thing you want to do is ask if there are any lessons that you can learn with regards to your customers, your market dynamics, your strategy, and your process. I'm going to break down the process, but I want to make sure that you get the first 3 points. When you have experienced a situation where you feel like you have failed, or you are experiencing something where you feel like has come short of the mark that you wanted to have or the outcome that you wanted to have, in your business, go back and review to see what lessons you can learn with regards to your customers, with regards to your market dynamics, and with regards to your strategy. Then you can also look at your process. So let's break that down. You have your planning process, You have your preparation, what you did in terms of how you prepped or prepared, and you can review your execution. So the planning, the preparation, and the execution of your process. Now, here's some other lessons you can look for. Once you've taken that time to allow those emotions to settle down a little bit, you can look for lessons in yourself or in your team. And you want to make sure that the lessons that you're looking for are constructive. Okay, so this is not an opportunity to like tear into yourself or tear into your team. This is an opportunity to say, how can we have done better, or where might we have been able to, execute, or looking internally at yourself or at your team to look at what lessons could have been found there. You can also look for emerging trends. Maybe there was a trend that was taking place or coming along that the results showed you something different than maybe what you were preparing for. And lastly, you can look at things that you can control. And I want to make sure that I touch on that a little bit, because I think failure can oftentimes make us feel like we're out of control. So you don't want to fall into that trap that says it doesn't matter what I do, nothing I do will work, nothing I do could have changed the outcome. You want to look at what you can control. We know that you can't control all of your circumstances, but there are definitely parts that you can. So take a look at the many factors that are inside of your control. And oftentimes, if we're really being critical, if we're really giving it a critical eye, I should say, you can find many facets and areas where you are actually in control or could have been in control. So you want to find some of those places to reflect on those and improve on those. All right. So now, number 3 is you want to be open about your failure. You want to share with someone. And I don't just mean just blasting yourself out there to the world like, hey, look at me, look at what I did. But share with someone who can actually help. You don't want to have to shoulder that burden of failure alone or by yourself. You don't have to do that. But have a chat with another business owner or a mentor. You can have a chat with your coach or your accountability partner. They may be able to provide additional insight that you didn't see. Or they could just be a sounding board. They can help you get through some of those feelings. They may be able to share an experience of failure with you as well, to show, for instance, that you're not alone in this. We all are going through these things. We all are going to fall short sometimes. And just keeping that in perspective and hearing it from someone who you trust or respect, and recognizing that they too have gone through something and they've endured that situation as well, can also be helpful. So take the time to be open about that failure. It can help you to really get over the embarrassment of it and the shame that you might be feeling. Even if you have kept that to yourself internally, if that's something that you're experiencing in your feelings, having that moment to talk with someone who you respect and who can actually add to the conversation can be helpful. So again, we're not just talking about blasting it out to the world. We're talking about someone who can understand your perspective, another business owner, a mentor, a coach, an accountability partner, someone along those lines. And then the 4th point is to look for patterns. Is this something that happens regularly? Might there be issues inside of your organization that you have overlooked or haven't addressed? And so you can kind of see some of that when you go through your review. If you've never taken the time to go back and review one of your failures, you might not readily see the patterns. But if you start to go back and review your failures and look at some of those things like your process, so your planning process, your preparation, your execution, if you start looking at lessons in yourself or lessons in your team, things of that sort, you might be able to see certain patterns that you can then address directly because they're starting to happen over and over again. And sometimes when they're happening and you're not looking for them, you don't recognize the pattern. So going back at times to address how these things have happened, you might begin to see some patterns. So look for those, because those might be some weak points in your organization that you hadn't considered. So those 4 points again: give yourself time. Give yourself time to be human. Do a thorough review after you've come out of your feelings. Do a thorough review. Be open about your failure. and look for patterns. And if you begin to implement those 4 steps, you can see how these areas or mistakes, areas of failure or mistakes that we have, that we are supposed to go through, that we will inevitably go through, can really help to cultivate your business acumen. They can really help to cultivate where you're going in your business life and the direction of your business, as well as give you that experience as you continue to grow, that even you can give back and pour into someone else. And even before you pour into someone else, that you can give back to yourself and pour into how you're going to continue to move your business forward. So I want to close on this. You will fail. You will fail. It's inevitable. But failing does not make you a failure. I want to say that again. Failing does not make you a failure. It is not a sign to give up. It is not an indication of your ability or any testament to who you are or what you can accomplish. Failing does not make you a failure. Failure is an opportunity. So continue to take the opportunities that life and failure present, and you will find your way to success.